The job was crap, but the pay was good. Jace Thorne guided the luxury diplomatic shuttle through Venal 70's upper atmosphere, the planet's neutral blue shield gleaming below. His passengers, a trio of self-important attachés from a system he could not pronounce, were blissfully silent in the back, probably congratulating themselves on the peaceful resolutions they had failed to achieve. Venal 7 Control, this is Diplomat 49er, Jace murmured into the comm, his voice a low rumble of fatigue. Requesting final approach vector to Spire Alpha. Cargo is fragile. He was Jace Thorne, formerly Sergeant Thorne of the Alliance Marine Corps, until he had rearranged his commanding officer's face for a very good reason. Now he was just Jace, a glorified bus driver in a rust bucket freighter who took side jobs like this to keep fuel in his own tanks. This gig, piloting diplomats to the neutral zone, was easy. Deliver the VIPs, collect the chit, and be gone before the post-summit celebrations started. He landed the shuttle with textbook precision on a high platform, the city's gleaming towers stretching into the twin-mooned sky. The attachés disembarked without a thank you. Jace just grinned, snatched the payment chit from the dispatch droid, and headed for the nearest public transport. His own ship, the Gilded Gutter, was parked 3 sectors away in the commercial hangars. But the Spire Alpha atrium was alive. Music, a strange thrumming alien rhythm, spilled out from the grand concourse. Dignitaries from 100 species draped in silks and shimmering light fabrics drifted toward the sound. The post-summit ball, a place Jace had no invitation for, and 0 business attending. He looked at the chit in his hand. It was enough for fuel, for repairs, and for a solid week of synthetic whiskey. He should just leave. He really should. But he was bored, and he had never responded well to closed doors. He still had a code cylinder he had borrowed from one of the attachés. On a whim, he slipped it into a service panel. The door to a private lift hissed open. "Well, what do you know?" he muttered, stepping inside. Diplomatic immunity. The grand concourse was obscene, crystal floated, fountains sprayed scented mist that shifted colors, and the aliens, tall, short, scaled, furred, gelatinous, and everything in between. Jace, in his worn flight jacket and cargo pants, stuck out like a sore thumb on a 6-fingered hand. He headed straight for the bar. The bartender was a floating, multi-tentacled being who served 6 drinks at once. Jace pointed at a vibrant, neon blue liquid. "Give me the strongest thing you've got that won't make me grow a new liver." 3 drinks later, the galaxy felt warmer. The thrumming music was almost catchy. He was just drunk enough to find the political posturing hilarious, and just sober enough to avoid starting a fight. He decided to explore, weaving his way through the crowd. He was navigating a particularly dense cluster of beings who looked like sentient trees when he stumbled. His boot caught the hem of some dignitary's robe. He pinwheeled, flailing for balance, and pitched forward. He crashed right into someone, not hard, but clumsy. "Whoa, sorry, my bad," he slurred, pushing himself upright. He put his hand out to steady himself against the person's back. His hand landed on something firm yet soft. It was covered in a rich, dark silk, but under the silk, it was different. It was curved, muscular, and felt alive. It was warm. He smelled ozone and a sharp, clean scent, like lavender and static. His fingers, calloused and rough, instinctively grazed the surface as he pulled his hand back. The person he had touched became rigid. It was a woman, he realized, small and slender, completely hidden under a dark, hooded cloak. She did not make a sound, but the air around her became ice, a sharp intake of breath. It was the only sound in the sudden, crushing silence that fell over their section of the room. Before Jace could form another apology, two figures materialized from the crowd. They were not dressed for a party. They were encased in sleek, crimson armor, and the energy glaives that appeared in their hands hummed with a deadly blue-white light. One blade was at his chest, the other at his throat. Jace's drunken haze evaporated like fuel on a hot engine block. He raised his hands slowly. "Easy, fellas, just a party foul. No harm done." The cloaked woman raised a single, slender hand. It was a pale, violet color. The guards froze. Their weapons did not waver, but they held their position. The woman's movements were slow, deliberate, as if every motion bore the weight of centuries. She reached for her hood. The silk-like cloak slid back, pooling around her shoulders. Jace's breath hitched. She was not human. Her skin was a flawless, pale lilac. Her features were sharp, aristocratic, and achingly beautiful, defined by high cheekbones and eyes the color of polished obsidian. Black hair was pulled back in an intricate, severe braid. But what held Jace's gaze was the tail. It was long, prehensile, and covered in fine midnight blue scales that shimmered in the light. It was lashing silently, angrily, behind her. His hand had grazed the very base of it, where the tail joined the elegant curve of her spine, right above her. Oh, hell. He recognized the insignia on the guard's armor, the twin crescent of the Lorelian Empire. He had heard stories, matriarchal, warlike, proud. He was looking at royalty. "Princess Kailara Vela," someone whispered in the stunned crowd. "Kill him," one of the guards snarled, his voice a digitized rasp. The glaive at Jace's throat hummed, pressing against his skin. "No." Kailara's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold as vacuum. It was not loud, but it held an absolute, unbreakable authority. The guards paused, their eyeless helmets turning toward her, confused but obedient. Jace swallowed, the dry click loud in his own ears. "Look, Your Highness, Princess, whatever. It was an accident. I had a few too many. I'm sorry about the tail. I didn't mean to." She stepped closer. Her obsidian gaze was intense, analytical. It felt like she was scanning his genetic code. The silence stretched, becoming a physical weight. Then, she spoke. Her voice projected, not shouting but carrying with perfect clarity to the silent, watching dignitaries. Her words were laced with a strange, solemn gravity. "By our ancient law, and by the sacred pact of the First Mothers, we are now engaged." Laughter bubbled in Jace's chest. It was a joke. It had to be. A really weird, alien, lost in translation joke. "Engaged? Lady, I just met you, and I'm sorry, I'm not interested. No offense." The guard snarled again, but Kailara's expression did not change. It was not the reaction of someone telling a joke. It was the reaction of someone pronouncing a death sentence. The guard seized him. His military instinct screamed. He tried to shrug them off, to break their grip, but they were impossibly strong, their armor locking their joints. They began to drag him from the ballroom, not toward the public exit, but toward a private lift. "Hey, let go of me!" Jace shouted, panic finally cutting through the confusion. "This is diplomatic soil. I'm a civilian contractor. You can't do this." Kailara followed, her face a mask of cold composure, her tail sweeping behind her. The crowd parted for them like water. They dragged him to a private landing pad. Jace's heart sank. He saw his ship, the Gilded Gutter, sitting dark on a lower pad. Then he saw a local security skiff locking a massive magnetic impound clamp onto its landing gear. "My ship. What are you doing to my ship?" "It is forfeit, human," the lead guard said, his voice devoid of emotion. Collateral for your insult. Insult? She said we were engaged. How is that an insult? They reached the edge of the pad. A ship was docked there, a ship that dwarfed the diplomatic spire and blotted out the stars. It was obsidian black, shaped like a blade, and bristled with weapon ports. A Lurelian imperial battleship. He recognized the name painted on its prow, Empress's Blade. A shiver of real, profound fear cut through him. They dragged him up the ramp. The air inside was cool, sterile, and smelled of ozone and metal. He was thrown into a sparse, gray room. The door hissed shut, and the heavy thud of a magnetic lock echoed in the small space. He was alone for hours. He paced. He pounded on the door. He shouted. Nothing. Finally, exhausted, he slumped against the bulkhead, his head in his hands. The door hissed open. Kelara entered. She was alone. She had changed out of the ball's finery and into a severe, dark blue uniform that was clearly military, yet tailored to her non-human physique. The scaled tail swayed gently, almost hypnotically behind her. "You need to call this off," Jace said, jumping to his feet. His voice was a rasp. "This is insane. It's a misunderstanding." Kelara looked at him with those dark, unblinking eyes. "It is not a misunderstanding, and it is a catastrophe. For me." "For you?" Jace laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "I'm the one in a holding cell on a warship. I'm the one who just lost his ship." "Be silent and listen. Jace Thorne." The sound of his name shocked him. "Ex-Alliance Marine, serial number 884 Tango," she continued, her voice a flat monotone. "Dishonorably discharged for striking a superior officer. Current profession freelance cargo pilot. Known smuggler of low-grade medical supplies and unregistered synthetics. A bottom feeder." Jace's blood ran cold. "You ran my file." Instantly, she began to pace, her movements fluid and predatory. The tail moved in agitated, looping circles. "In my culture, the Vela, the tail is not an appendage. It is the conduit of our life bond. It is sacred. Our nerve clusters are densest there. It is how we sense the world, our emotions, our connection." She stopped. "For a commoner to touch a royal tail is sacrilege, punishable by death. For anyone to touch the culve, the base, where the spine and the soul meet, is a gesture of mating, a formal binding proposal." "I wasn't proposing, I was stumbling, I was drunk." "Your intent is irrelevant," she snapped, her cold composure finally breaking. "The act was public. Half the quadrant's diplomats witnessed it. You touched me. You claimed me." Jace just stared, his mind unable to process the words. "So unclaim me. Tell them you changed your mind. Tell them I'm a drunken idiot human and it doesn't count." "If I do," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "my honor demands I kill you." He stepped back, hitting the bulkhead. "What?" "You would be rejecting me. A public humiliation. The only recourse for such an insult is a trial by combat, a death challenge, and I assure you, human, you would not survive it for a single second." She turned away from him, staring at the blank metal wall. "My family is complicated. My rivals on Lorelia are many. They are already using this. She is so weak. She consorts with a drunken, primitive mammal. She defiles the bloodline. If I reject you, I am weak. If I kill you, I am merciful. But I am still the princess who was publicly groped and had to execute a pathetic creature for it. Still humiliated." She turned back, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "But if I accept the law, it is the law. They are bound to honor it, even as they despise it." Jace's mind raced, trying to find an angle, an escape. "You're saying I have to marry you or you kill me." "That is the traditional path," she confirmed. But there is another, one I find equally distasteful but necessary. She looked away, a flicker of something not weakness, but profound strain crossing her perfect features. Or we proceed, temporarily. Jace latched onto the word like a drowning man grabbing a lifeline. Temporarily. We perform the initial honor ceremonies. We present a united, plausible front. It buys me time to secure my position, to identify those who would use this against me. And what about me? Jace asked, his voice raw. What do I get out of this fake engagement? You get to live, she said flatly. All emotion gone. You get your ship back. And when I am secure, when I am Empress, I will find a way to dissolve the bond. A legal loophole. A quiet annulment that does not involve your execution or my disgrace. Jace scrubbed his hands over his face, the stubble scraping his palms. This was beyond insane. He was trapped, death by combat, or play acting as a princess's fiancé. He looked at her. Stern, yes, proud, absolutely. But in her eyes there was a deep, cold loneliness there, a loneliness he recognized. Fine, Jace said, his voice a rasp. Fine, we fake it, but I'm not your pet. We have ground rules. I'm not bowing. I'm not scraping. Kailara nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible dip of her chin. Agreed. You will be treated as a consort protem. You will be respectful. You will be clean. You will learn our customs. And, her voice dropped, you will not touch me again, under any circumstances. Understood? Deal, Jace snapped. Now get me out of this cell and into some real clothes. I smell like cheap synth ale. The real clothes were Lorelian silks, a deep charcoal gray that felt strangely light and warm against his skin. They fit him perfectly. He had a feeling his file had included his measurements. Then came the honor ceremony processing. It was not a ceremony. It was a medical bay, gleaming white and smelling of antiseptic. What is this? Jace asked, eyeing the sterile equipment and the two Lorelian women in medical whites. A consort must be vetted, Kailara said. She was standing in the corner, arms crossed over her chest, tail still. For genetic compatibility, for diseases, for weaknesses. You've got to be kidding me. This is fake. Remember? We're faking. The medics do not know that, Kailara said, her voice low. The priests who must bless the union do not know that. They must believe it, or it is all for nothing. Strip. Jace glared at her. No! The two medics, their skin the same pale violet, approached him. Kailara sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. It is a sign of trust. In our culture, the consort-to-be bears himself to his new matron's healers. It proves he has nothing to hide. It is an intimate act of submission. The last word hung in the air, toxic. If you refuse, she continued, they will see it as a deep insult to me. They will note it in the registry. My enemies will have their proof that this is a sham within the hour. And our deal is void. You will be executed for the original insult. Jace clenched his jaw so hard it ached. Everything with you people is life and death, isn't it? Yes, she said simply. Cursing a blue streak under his breath, Jace ripped the silk tunic over his head. He was still wearing his cargo pants. He kicked off his boots and stripped down, standing there in nothing but his skin and his fury. He had scars from his military days, and a few fresh ones from his new profession. He dared them to comment. The medics were professional, but their instruments were strange. They scanned him with cold light. They drew blood, which was blue in their vials. They tested his muscle density with small, stinging shocks, his nerve responses with vibrating pads. He endured it all with a stony silence. Then, the older medic, one with a sour, pinched face, moved to his lower body. "And this," the medic said, her voice clinical, "is the test of vigor." She produced a long, silver, vibrating instrument that looked like a weapon. Jace's eyes widened. "Absolutely not. Kaylara, you draw the line. Tell her." Kaylara, who had been watching with a detached, almost bored expression, suddenly became rigid. A darker purple, a deep plum, flushed up her neck and colored her high cheekbones. "It is protocol, Jace," she said, but her voice was a shade higher, strained. "It is a fertility metric, to ensure the bloodline can continue." "I am not doing a fertility metric," Jace roared, instinctively covering himself. "The deal is off! Kill me! I don't care!" The older medic smiled, a thin, cruel expression. "The princess heir must be assured of her consort's ability to produce a strong clutch." "A clutch? I'm not a lizard." "Protocol. Jace," Kaylara said again, but she took a step forward. She spoke to the medic, her own language. A series of sharp, clicking, authoritative commands. The medic argued back, gesturing with the silver device. Kaylara's voice became steel. Her tail gave a single, sharp, angry thwack against the floor. The medic bowed, deeply, her face a mask of resentment. She put the silver instrument away. "The princess heir," the medic said, her tone dripping with acid, "has vouched for your vigor. On her own honor, she takes your purity into her own hands. A foolish, sentimental move." Kaylara ignored her, turning her back on the medic. "The examination is complete. Dress him." As the medics left, Kaylara turned to follow, but not before Jace saw it. The high color on her cheekbones was stark. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, and her hands, clenched at her sides, were trembling. She was not as cold as she pretended. The thought was interesting. They gave him opulent quarters, a vast room of dark blue silks and polished black stone. The door was locked from the outside. He was a prisoner in a silk cage. He spent hours pacing, the alien stars of an unknown quadrant wheeling past the massive viewport. He was exhausted, angry, confused, and strangely, not terrified. "I just resigned." He was dozing in a chair, hours later, when he heard voices. They were just outside his door. Lorelian, hushed, urgent, he crept closer, pressing his ear to the cold, carved stone of the doorway. Two distinct voices, male. "It is a disgrace. A human. He smells of mammals. Fermented grain." "Calm yourself, Captain. The matrons are furious, but her own public pronunciation traps Vela. She cannot back down without shaming the Empress herself. She is weak. This proves it. She should have killed him on the spot. Her mother, the Empress Vera, would have. This is not the Lorelian way. Patience. The Prince Regent Dovar is already en route. He will challenge, as is his right. This human will not last a day. He will be space-dusted by week's weekend. And if he does, if she, in her sentimentality, refuses Dovar's challenge, if she bonds with this off-world filth? A long, chilling pause. The second voice dropped lower, colder, full of ambition. Then the engagement will fail, and so will she. The council is already preparing the motion. The Aunt Matron Nevea will be a far more suitable replacement. A chill, far colder than the recycled air, ran down Jace's spine. They were not just angry. They were plotting a coup, and Kaylara, the ice-cold princess, was standing right in the middle of the blast radius. He was not just a pawn in her game. He was the linchpin, the single piece holding the entire deadly machine from collapsing. And it was about to be pulled. The Empress's blade was a tomb, and Jace Thorn was its most privileged prisoner. The battleship had made the jump to hyperspace, a disorienting lurch that Jace felt in his teeth, and was now hurtling toward Lorelia, the imperial capital. He had not seen Kalara for 2 days. His guards, a silent pair of crimson-armored sentinels, informed him she had been summoned to the War Council by her mother, the Empress Vera. Jace was left to pace the opulent, stifling confines of his quarters. He had everything he could want: food that tasted like exotic fruit and seared meat, silks that felt like water, a viewport that showed the swirling psychedelic blue of faster-than-light travel. He was also, unequivocally, a captive. The door to his chamber hissed open on the 3rd day. It was not Kalara. The man who entered was Lorelian, but where Kalara was all sharp edges and cold authority, he was smooth curves and flowing grace. He was handsome, with the same pale violet skin and obsidian eyes, but his black hair was worn loose, falling to his shoulders. He wore no uniform, only robes of a deep, decadent purple. His tail, a shade lighter blue than Kalara's, swayed with an easy, almost lazy confidence. "Jace Thorn," he said, his voice a warm, melodic purr. He smiled, and it was a masterpiece of charisma. "I am Lycor Vela, Kalara's cousin, and I suppose your cousin-to-be." Jace stayed on his feet, arms crossed. He did not like this man. "Good for you. Get lost." Lycor laughed, a light tinkling sound. "So brusque. My cousin has always preferred unpolished diamonds. I am merely here on her behalf, to ensure our new guest is comfortable. She is so often preoccupied. The burdens of the state, you know." He glided into the room, his guards remaining pointedly outside the door. Jace's guards remained by his own door, a silent 4-way standoff. Lycor picked up a decanter of the shimmering blue wine Jace had been ignoring. "She did not even offer you wine? How dreadfully rude." He poured 2 glasses. "It is my understanding that humans find great solace in fermentation." He offered a glass. Jace did not take it. "I'm fine," Jace said, his voice flat. Lycor's smile widened. He set the glass down near Jace. "You are not fine, Jace Thorn. You are a prisoner. You have been chained to a woman who is, by all accounts, a block of Arctic ice. She is a creature of duty and law, not passion." He moved closer, his scent a mix of heavy musk and spice. "A pity. A man with your raw vitality. To be wasted on her." Lycor's long, slender fingers reached out and brushed Jace's arm, just above the elbow. The touch was light, but it made Jace's skin crawl. "I've been told," Lycor whispered, his eyes gleaming, "that human males are far more appreciative of comfort. Far more direct." He leaned in, his gaze dropping to Jace's mouth. "Kalara will use you as a political tool, a shield. I would see you as a man." Jace's hand snapped out, clamping around Lycor's wrist like a steel trap. Lorelian's eyes widened, the first genuine expression Jace had seen on him. "Touch me again," Jace growled, his voice a low threat. "And I'll break your arm." "He will not have to." The voice was ice, cutting through the heavy scent of musk. Kalara stood in the doorway, flanked by her own guards. Her face was a mask of cold fury. The War Council must have been brutal. She looked exhausted, but her eyes burned. Lycor snatched his arm back, his charm evaporating, replaced by a sullen, aristocratic pout. "Kalara, cousin, I was just welcoming our new family member. You left him so unattended." Kalara walked into the room. She did not look at Jace. Her entire focus was on Lycor, and her gaze was a physical force. "You will not come here again. You will not speak to him, and you will not look at him." "Kalara," Lycor scoffed, trying to regain his footing. "He is just a—" "He is mine," Kalara snapped. The words hit the air with the crack of a whip. Her tail, which had been still, gave a single violent lash. "What is mine, cousin? You do not touch. Now, get out!" Lycor's face flushed a dark, mottled purple. He was, for the first time, speechless. He glared at Jace, then at Kaylara. With a sound of disgust, he swept from the room, his own tail rigid with offense. The door hissed shut. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. Jace was the first to break it. He was shaking, not with fear, but with a white-hot rage. "What the hell was that?" Kaylara finally looked at him. "A political maneuver my cousin enjoys." "I am not," Jace roared, taking a step toward her. "Talking about him. I am talking about you. He is mine? What is mine? You do not touch. What the hell do you think I am? I am not a pet. I am not a piece of property you claim. I am a man. You are a complication." She yelled back, her own control shattering. The exhaustion and pressure of the last few days erupted. "You are a weapon that was handed to my enemies. That fool, Lykor, was not trying to seduce you. He was trying to be caught seducing you, to prove that my consort was unfaithful before the bond was even affirmed, to prove I cannot even control my own household. Vipers. Thorn surrounds me, and you just invited one into your nest. I didn't invite him. You're the one who locked me in here. I am the one trying to keep you alive," she sagged, the anger draining out of her, leaving only a profound, bone-deep weariness. She walked to the viewport and stared into the blue, swirling void. "I just spent 3 days," she said, her voice quiet now, "in a room with my mother and her generals. They debated for 9 hours. The strategic benefit of my execution versus my forced marriage." Jace's anger faltered. "What? This engagement and this accident has thrown the succession into chaos. My mother is old. She is powerful, but she is paranoid. My aunt matron Nevaeh sees her chance. Prince Dovar, my rejected suitor, is on his way. As you heard, my mother sees this as my final test. If I cannot control this situation, if I cannot control you, then I am not fit to rule. She will set me aside and let Nevaeh or Dovar take the throne. My life's work, my entire future, my people, it all balances on you." She finally turned. Her obsidian eyes were dark, haunted. "So, yes, you are a pawn. You are my most important piece and my most vulnerable one. And if I lose you, I lose everything." The raw, bleeding honesty of it silenced him. He saw her, really saw her, for the first time. Not the cold-blooded princess, but a woman backed into a corner, fighting with the only weapons she had: law, tradition, and a terrifying, rigid control. "What happens now?" he asked, his own voice softer. "We land on Lorelia in 6 hours, she said, her mask of composure sliding back into place. "And we begin the ritual of affirmation, in front of the entire royal court, in front of my mother, and in front of my enemies." The grand hall of matrons on Lorelia made the ballroom on Venal 7 look like a dive bar. The ceiling was a vault of living crystal that pulsed with a soft, internal light. Thousands of Lorelians, packed into tiers of balconies, watched in absolute judgmental silence. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the same lavender static smell he associated with Kaylara. Jace stood beside her on a raised black marble dais. He was dressed in even more elaborate silks, this time a deep black edged with the crimson of the royal house. They fit him like a second skin, and he had never felt more exposed. At the far end of the hall, on a throne carved from a single massive black stone, sat Empress Vera. She was ancient, her lilac skin wrinkled and scarred, her black eyes holding a terrifying, patient intelligence. She watched the proceedings with the detached interest of a biologist studying microbes. A trio of ancient robed Lorellians, genderless and dried out, approached. They were the priests of the first blood. One of them held a ceremonial bowl. "The bond has been declared," one of them intoned, their voice like sand pouring over glass. The touch was given. Now, the touch must be affirmed. The consort must prove his familiarity, his right to claim before the matrons and the empress. Jace's blood ran cold. He looked at Kaylara. Her face was marble, absolutely devoid of expression. "Jace Thorn of the human worlds," the priest said, turning to him. "You have claimed the princess heir Kaylara Vela. Affirm your claim." Jace's mouth was dry. "What do I do?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Kailara's lips did not move. "You must caress my tail," she whispered back, the words laced with a humiliation so deep it was almost a physical pain. "From base to midpoint, slowly, to show intimacy, to show the court I have accepted you." He felt the blood drain from his face, in front of all these peoples, all these hostile, alien faces. This was not a ceremony, it was a punishment. It was his ultimate degradation. He was the performing monkey, the human pet. "Do it," she hissed, her voice a desperate, terrified plea. "Or they will tear us apart on this very dais." He looked at her, and in her rigid, frozen posture, he saw the same terror he felt. They were in this together, trapped. He turned to her, his movements stiff. The crowd was silent. He could feel thousands of eyes on him, on his hands. Kaylara stood with her back partially to him, her tail, long, scaled, and perfectly still, presented to him. "Now," the priest commanded. Jace raised his hand. It was shaking. He put his rough, calloused, human hand on the base of her tail, on the fine, midnight blue scales. They were cool to the touch. He flinched. She flinched. He gritted his teeth. He began to move his hand, sliding it up the strong, muscular curve. He was hyper-aware of everything, the dry scrape of his skin against the fine scales, the absolute silence of the hall, the burning intensity of the Empress's gaze. It was agonizing, humiliating. And then, beneath his palm, he felt it. It started as a low, subsurface vibration. He thought it was his own hand shaking, but it was not. It was her. The muscle beneath the scales was trembling, a fine, uncontrollable high-frequency shiver. It was not a shudder of pleasure. It was a tremor of pure, unadulterated terror. He continued the gesture, his hand moving up to the midpoint of her tail, as the ritual demanded. The trembling did not stop. He could feel her breathing, ragged and suppressed. She was not a block of ice. She was a woman being flayed alive in public, and he was the one holding the knife. He pulled his hand back, clenching it into a fist at his side. The priest nodded, a dry, satisfied look. "The affirmation is accepted. The first bond is sealed." A low murmur, like a nest of disturbed insects, passed through the crowd. Jace did not know if it was good or bad. He just wanted to be sick. Later, in his quarters, he was pacing, ripping the offensive silks from his body when she entered without knocking. The guards did not stop her. She was still in her ritual robes, but she was shaking. "I need to," she began, her voice small, broken. "What the hell was that?" Jace said, his voice a low grate. The trembling. Was that part of the act? She looked up, and her obsidian eyes were glistening. "No." The word was a shattered piece of glass. "No. That was not part of the act." She wrapped her arms around herself. No one has touched me in years. Not since before. My first consort, he was a political match, arranged by my mother. He betrayed me. To my aunt. He used my trust to map my private corridors, to steal my correspondence. He touched me, and he sold me. She looked at Jace, her vulnerability a raw, open wound. I vowed I would never let anyone close again. Never. And then you, a human, an accident. She was crying, silent tears tracing paths down her pale cheeks. In front of them all, I thought I would break. Jace stared at her, his anger gone, replaced by a hollow, aching pity. Kaylara. He took a step, and she flinched, a violent, full-body reaction. He froze. I am sorry, she whispered. I am not what my people need. I am not strong. You are the strongest person I have ever met, Jace said, the words coming out before he could stop them. To stand there and endure that? That's not a weakness. That's insane. A strange, strangled sound came from her. It might have been a laugh or a sob. They were walking back from the Empress's throne room 2 days later. The assassination attempt came without warning. They were in a public, arched corridor, flanked by her 2 crimson guards. A servant, a lowly, gray-clad Lorelian, was polishing a statue. As they passed, the servant lunged. Jace saw it all in slow motion. The glint of steel was not a glaive. It was a vibro dagger, a military-grade weapon, humming with a frequency that could pass through armor. The servant's eyes were not filled with fanaticism, but with a dull, programmed emptiness. It was too fast for the guards. Their training was for ranged threats, for formal challenges. Jace's training was for the gutter. Kaylara! He yelled. He did not think. He reacted. He shoved her, hard, sending her sprawling onto the marble floor. In the same motion, his hand went to his own boot, where he had, after an hour of work, managed to secrete a small hold-out plasma pistol he had acquired from a maintenance panel in his room. He did not have time to aim. He pointed. The assassin was on him, the vibro dagger plunging toward his chest. Jace fired twice. Psst, psst, 2, perfectly placed, smoking. Blue-white holes appeared in the assassin's chest. The dull eyes widened in surprise. The Lorelian crumpled at Jace's feet. The dagger clattered, skidding to a halt an inch from Kaylara's hand. Her guards finally reacted, leveling their glaives at the dead body. Silence. Jace was panting, adrenaline thrumming through him. He looked down at the smoking pistol in his hand, then let it clatter to the floor. Kaylara was staring at him, her chest heaving, her eyes wide. She was not looking at him like a princess. She was not looking at him like a pawn. She was looking at him like a protector. The encounter with Empress Vera was brief. Jace was brought to the throne room, not as a prisoner, but not as a guest. The old woman stared at him from her stone chair for a long, silent minute. "You are fast, mammal," she finally rasped, her voice like grinding stones. "You have the reflexes of a predator, not a pilot." "I was a soldier," Jace said, his voice echoing in the vast, cold hall. "Yes, a disgraced one." The Empress's lips quivered in what might have been a smile. It was terrifying. Kaylara is sentimental. She believes in compassion. She said the word like Jace had heard Kaylara say it, like a disease. She believes in trust. These things are luxuries. They are weaknesses. The Empress leaned forward. "I do not know if you are another one of her weaknesses or an unexpected asset. You saved the bloodline. For that, you have my amusement." She waved a gnarled, ancient hand. "Go. My daughter is waiting for you. She finds you distracting. Keep her distracted. And keep sharp." She looked at her guards. "He is an amusing toy. I would like to keep him." He was dismissed. That night, Kaylara came to his room. She brought a bottle of deep, dark Lorelian wine, the same kind Lycor had offered. "A gift," she said, "from my mother. She is pleased, in her own way." Jace took the bottle and opened it. He took a long swallow directly from the neck. It burned, a clean, hot fire. He handed it to her. She, the picture of royal decorum, looked at the bottle, looked at him, and then, to his utter shock, mirrored him, taking a long, unprincess-like drink. She coughed, color flooding her cheeks. "My mother is wrong," she whispered, her voice rough from the wine. "She thinks fear is the only way to rule. She thinks to be strong. I must be her, cold, cruel, untouching." She sat on the chaise, her tail curling around her feet. "I do not want to be her. I want to lead our people, to change them, to stop this, the plotting, the assassin, the fear. I want them to follow me not because they have to, because they believe." She looked up at him, her dark eyes swimming with unshed tears and the flush of the wine. No one believes I can. They all think I am weak." "You're not weak," Jace said, his voice thick. He sat on the floor, his back against the chaise, near her, but not touching. The tension in the room was a tangible thing, a humming wire. They drank, they talked. He told her about the military, about the commanding officer, about the gutter. She told him about her training, her first diplomatic missions, and the crushing weight of her mother's expectations. Hours passed. The bottle was empty. The stars outside the viewport had changed. "You are," she said, her words slightly slurred, "you are not like them, Jace. You are honest. You are direct. You saved me." It was reflexes, he muttered, but his heart was pounding. She leaned down from the chaise. Her hair had come undone, falling in a black wave over one shoulder. She was close. He could smell the wine, and her own scent, the lavender and static. "No," she whispered. "It was you." He did not know who moved first. It was impossible. It was inevitable. His hand came up, his fingers brushing her cheek. Her skin was soft. She leaned into his touch, and then he was kissing her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was all the anger, the fear, the confusion, the adrenaline of the previous week. It was his frustration and her desperation, crashing together. Her lips were soft, but she kissed him back with a fierce, desperate, hungry strength that stole his breath. He tasted wine and salt. They broke apart, panting, their foreheads resting against each other. "We are drunk," she breathed, her eyes wide, stunned. "Yeah," he rasped. "We are." "This is a complication, a massive one," he agreed. She pulled back, her composure visibly fractured. "I must rest." The wine. She did not leave. She could not. To be seen walking from his quarters, disheveled and wine-drunk, would be a disaster. She stumbled to the chaise, collapsing onto it. Just for a moment, to regain my composure. She was asleep in seconds, the exhaustion and the alcohol claiming her. Jace watched her for a long time. He pulled a silk blanket from the bed and draped it over her. She did not stir. He went to his own chair, his mind a ruin. He fell into a restless, fitful sleep. He woke hours later. The light in the room shifted to a deep, pre-dawn blue. His neck ached. He was cold. He looked down. The silk blanket he had put on Kailara was still on her, but something was wrong. Something was on him. He felt a strange, firm pressure on his leg. He looked again, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. Kailara was still fast asleep on the chair, but in her sleep, her long, scaled, prehensile tail had uncoiled. It had stretched across the few feet of floor between them. It was wrapped twice, tightly, possessively, around his left ankle. He stared at it. He did not breathe. It was an unconscious, instinctual animal act. She had claimed him in her sleep. He was tethered to her. His heart, which had been pounding a confused rhythm, now beat with a single terrifying, sinking realization. He was trapped. Jace woke up cold. The pressure on his ankle was gone. He was alone in the pre-dawn chill. Kaylara was gone. The only evidence she had been there at all was the empty wine bottle and the silk blanket, pooled on the floor by the chaise. He bolted from the chair, his heart hammering a rhythm of pure, unadulterated panic. The tale, the kiss, the shared confessions. It had been real. Not a political maneuver, not a drunken mistake, but real. He scrubbed his hands over his face, his breath coming in short, harsh gasps. He was a cargo pilot, a small-time smuggler. He ran from complications, he did not tether himself to them. And Kaylara Vela was not a complication. She was a galactic-level catastrophe, a walking, talking, tail-wrapping black hole. The feeling of that tail, so possessive, so strong, even in her sleep. It was a chain he did not know how to break. He was pacing when she entered, hours later. She was back in her severe, high-collared uniform, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to pull at her temples. Her face was pale, her eyes guarded. The Princess of Ice was back. "Good morning, Jace," she said, her voice a perfect, cool monotone. "The Empress requires our presence for the morning meal. You will be expected in 30 minutes. "Stop," Jace said, his voice a rasp. He held up a hand. "Just stop." She froze, her mask-like composure faltering for a fraction of a second. "Stop what?" Us, last night, the tale." He spat the word. "This was supposed to be fake, a deal. I help you. You get me my ship. I get to live." That was the deal. Kaylara's face hardened. A deep, plum-colored flush crept up her neck, a flush of humiliation, not passion. The wine was a miscalculation. It was more than the wine. "And you know it," he snapped, angry at her, angry at himself. "Look, Kaylara, I can't. This isn't me. I am not the guy who plays consort to an alien princess. I am not the guy who fights whatever. I'm the guy who runs. I need out." He expected her to be angry. He expected her to threaten him with execution. He did not expect the look of profound, devastating hurt that flashed in her eyes before she crushed it, burying it under a glacier of royal protocol. She straightened her spine, becoming an inch taller. "I see." Her voice was now so cold it could freeze hydrogen. "Then my assessment last night was incorrect. You are indeed exactly like them. You are a coward." "I'm not a coward," Jace shot back. "I'm practical. I'm a human, in a palace full of aliens who want me dead. I'm in over my head, and last night I can't be what you want me to be." "I do not want you to be anything," she said, each word a chip of ice. "I require you to be a shield. Your personal feelings, your terror, your inadequacies are irrelevant to me." She turned to leave. "The deal remains. You will play your part. You will continue to live. And when I am done with you, you will be free. We will not speak of the miscalculation again." 30 minutes. The door hissed shut, leaving Jace alone in the silence. He had what he wanted. He was free of the thing that had been growing between them. The arrangement was purely transactional again. So why did he feel like he had just ripped out his own guts? The arrival of Prince Dovar Valen was not a subtle affair. His ship, a massive chrome-plated dreadnought bristling with garish, gold-plated weapon ports, eclipsed the Lorelian sun as it descended. It was a ship built by arrogance and fueled by ego. He was, Jace thought, exactly the kind of bastard who would own a ship like that. Dovar was huge for a Lorelian, a full head taller than Jace, with a body composed of brutalist muscle. His skin was a darker, bruised shade of purple, and a jagged ritual scar ran from his left temple, across his eye, to his jaw. His tail, thick as a power conduit, was barbed at the tip. He strode. "Jace," she said, her voice shaking, "I am begging you. Forfeit." "What? And let that chrome dome bastard have you? No chance. He will kill you," she hissed, her eyes wide with a terror that was not for herself. "Jace, this is not a human brawl. This is a Lorelian trial. It is to the death. He is the most decorated duelist in the quadrant. He has killed over 30 opponents in the ring. You are a pilot." "I was a soldier," Jace said, the old stubborn, stupid pride rearing its head. "And I'm not running." "You are a fool," she cried, tears of frustration and fear welling in her eyes. "If you forfeit, you are shamed, but you live. I can deal with the humiliation. I can handle Dovar. I cannot watch you be torn apart. I will not." "Tough," Jace said, his voice harder than he intended. "Because I'm not giving him the satisfaction, and I'm not giving your aunt, or Lycor, or anyone else, the satisfaction of seeing your human pet run with his tail between his legs. I'm fighting." She stared at him, her face a mask of disbelief and anguish. "You will die." "Then I die," Jace said, and was shocked to find he almost meant it. "But I'm not backing down." She struck him, a hard, open-palmed slap that cracked across the room and sent his head snapping to the side. He looked back at her, his cheek stinging. Her hand was trembling, her chest heaving. "Damn you, Jace Thorne," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Damn you for your stupid human honor." She turned and fled the room. Jace knew he could not win, not in a fair fight. But he was not a Lorelian noble. He had never had a fair fight in his life. He found the barracks of Kaelara's personal guard, the War Maidens of Vela, an elite, all-female unit with armor as crimson as their princesses. Their captain, a tall, scarred woman named Thala, regarded him with open contempt. "The princess's human consort," Thala said, her voice a low growl. "Come to hide behind our skirts?" "No," Jace said, meeting her gaze. "I've come to learn how to kill Prince Dovar." Thala laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You? Kill Dovar? He will snap your soft human spine in the first 10 seconds. "Probably," Jace agreed. "But I want to make those 10 seconds hurt. You hate him, don't you?" Thala's smile vanished. "He is a stain on the honor of Lorelia, a brute and a coward who hides behind ritual." "And he humiliated your princess," Jace added, pressing the advantage. "She's bound by law. She can't act on, but I can. Teach me. Teach me what he knows. Teach me his weaknesses." Thala studied him for a long, silent moment. "You will not survive the training," she said. "Try me," Jace replied, and she tried. For 4 days, Jace lived in a world of pure, unadulterated pain. The War Maidens did not hold back. They were not human. They were faster, stronger, and had a preternatural sense of balance thanks to their tails. They slammed him against padded walls, dislocated his shoulder twice, and taught him the basics of their glaive and shield combat. He learned that Lorelians were apex predators, but they were also creatures of ritual. They had stances, they had forms, they had honorable openings and accepted counters. They were, in a word, predictable. And he learned about Dovar. "He is all aggression," Thala grunted, slamming her practice shield into Jace's ribs and sending him flying. "He overcommits. His left side is weaker from an old plasma burn. He compensates by always striking from the right. And he is vain. He will want to draw it out, to make the princess watch you bleed." "Good," Jace gasped, pulling himself up from the floor, his body a symphony of new bruises. "Vain is good. Vain is sloppy." He also learned about Lorelian honor. He saw how the War Maidens respected Thala, how they revered Kaelara, not just as a princess, but as their chosen leader. He saw the quiet, fierce devotion they had to their culture, a culture he had dismissed as barbaric. He saw their pain at Dovar's presence, at the shame he brought to the court. He was not just fighting for himself, he was fighting for them. On the fifth night, he was alone in the training room, his body screaming, trying to master a defensive block that kept failing him. "You are dropping your left shoulder," a quiet voice said from the shadows. Kaylara stepped into the light. She was not in her uniform or her robes. She was in a simple black, athletic tunic. Her tail was bound in leather straps for practice. "What are you doing here?" Jace gasped, leaning on his practice staff. "My war maidens are loyal," she said, her voice soft. "But they are still my subjects. They told me what their human pet was doing." She walked onto the mat, her bare feet silent on the padding. "You are still a fool, but you are a magnificent fool." She took up a staff position. "Thala is right. You drop your shoulder. You are telegraphing your counterblock. Dovar will see it, and he will gut you." She moved, a black blur, and her staff connected with his ribs, exactly where Thala had hit him. He collapsed, the air driven from his lungs. "Again," she commanded. For hours, they trained. She was not a princess. She was a warrior. She was faster than Thala, more precise, more ruthless. She anticipated his every move, countered his every sloppy human instinct. She dismantled him, again and again, and forced him to rebuild. "Stop fighting like a human," she panted, her face beaded with sweat, her hair coming loose. "You are all brute force and reaction. You have no form, no center. Feel the energy. Feel the gravity. Use that." "I do not have a tail," he grunted, parrying a vicious thrust. "I do not have your center." "Then make one," she snapped, and her tail, even bound, lashed out and swept his legs from under him. He crashed to the mat. She was above him, straddling him. Her staff pressed against his throat. They were both breathing hard, their chests heaving. The Empress and the entire court watched from shielded balconies. "The challenge is given," the same priest from the affirmation ceremony intoned. "By Prince Dovar Valen, for the hand and honor of the princess heir. The consort, Jace Thorn, has accepted. The trial of proving is joined. By the first blood, there can be only one victor. The combat is to the death." A transparent, shimmering energy field sealed the arena. Dovar stalked out from the opposite gate. He was bare-chested, his massive, scarred torso gleaming. He carried 2 energy axes crackling with red, lethal power. He looked at Jace and laughed, a booming, arrogant sound. "You are small, human," he roared for the crowd to hear. "You are soft. I will enjoy this. I will give your skull to my princess as a wedding gift." "He's all aggression," Jace muttered to himself, remembering Thala's words. "Vain and sloppy." He held up his own shield and glaive, a standard-issue set that felt heavy and awkward. "Begin!" the priest bellowed. Dovar charged. It was not a run. It was a small earthquake. He came at Jace like a runaway freighter. Both axes raised. Jace did what Kaylara had taught him. He did not meet the charge. He used his center. He pivoted, dropping his shoulder not in weakness, but in a feint, and slammed his shield into Dovar's weaker left side. The sound was a dull thud, and Dovar grunted, surprised, stumbling past him. The crowd gasped. Dovar stopped, his smile gone. He turned, his eyes narrowed. A trick, a coward's move. "A practical one," Jace panted, his arms already aching. Dovar attacked again, but this time, he was not just a brute. He was a Lorelian brute. He used his tail, a thick prehensile whip, to slam into Jace's shield, knocking him off balance, while his axes created a red web of death. Jace was in hell. He was hopelessly outmatched. He was not a Lorelian warrior. He was a human brawler, and he was being systematically, brutally dismantled. The glaive was knocked from his hand. The shield was shattered by a two-handed overhead blow. Dovar's barbed tail slammed into his chest, sending him crashing into the energy wall. He felt ribs crack. He looked up, gasping. He saw Kailara, on her feet, her knuckles white as she gripped the rail of her balcony. Her face was a mask of pure, screaming terror. "This is it, mammal," Dovar gloated, stalking toward him. "This is where you die. She will be mine, and I will make her scream your name while I—" "You talk too much," Jace spat, blood and spittle flying from his lips, as Dovar raised his axe for the final killing blow. Jace, with his last ounce of strength, slammed his fist on the ground, right onto the small, glowing yellow rune he had been eyeing for the last 5 minutes. "What?" Dovar said, confused. The grav warp activated. Jace had seen the arena techs testing them. Kailara had taught him to feel the gravity. This was not a move. This was gutter tactic. The gravity under Dovar reversed. Not all of it. Just a 1-meter square patch. The massive, muscle-bound prince, with all his momentum, was suddenly inexplicably weightless from the waist down. He shot into the air, all 250 kilos of him, his axes flailing, his tail lashing, his roar of triumph turning into a high-pitched shriek of surprise. Jace, his ribs on fire, forced himself to his feet. Dovar came crashing down, landing flat on his back. The wind knocked out of him. His axes skittered away. Jace was on him in a second. He grabbed Dovar's own discarded axe, the red energy humming in his hand. He planted his boot on the prince's massive chest and raised the weapon high. Silence. The arena was utterly silent. Jace was panting, bleeding from a dozen cuts. Dovar stared up at him, his eyes wide with disbelief and, for the first time, fear. "Do it, human!" Dovar spat, his pride returning. "Finish it, claim your honor." Jace looked at the axe. He looked at Dovar. He looked up at Kailara. Her hand was over her mouth, her eyes unreadable. He saw Thala in the crowd, her face grim. "No," Jace said, his voice a rasp, but it carried in the perfect silence. He deactivated the axe. The red energy field died. He tossed the heavy, inert weapon to the side. "You're not worth the energy," Jace said. He turned his back on the defeated prince. He walked, limping, every step in agony toward the exit gate. He had broken every rule. He had won with a trick. And then, he refused to kill. He had shown mercy, in a Lurelian trial of proving. The entire court was silent. Dovar, defeated and shamed, not by death but by pity, was a broken thing on the arena floor. Jace looked up at Kailara. She was staring at him, her hand slowly lowering from her mouth. She was not looking at him like a human, or a consort, or a pawn. She was looking at him like he was a myth, like he was something new, something she had never seen before. Something, he thought, she had been waiting for. That night, she came to him. His quarters were dark. He was submerged in a biofoam tank, the regenerative gel soothing his cracked ribs and lacerated skin. He heard the door hiss open. He surfaced, the gel sluicing off his scarred torso. Kailara stood there, silhouetted against the light of the hallway. She was in a simple dark blue silk robe. Her hair was down. She walked into the room. The door hissed shut, plunging them into the dim light of the medical displays. Neither of them spoke. The silence was not the cold, formal silence of before. It was a heavy, thrumming, vibrating thing, full of everything unsaid. She walked to the edge of the tank. He stood up, the gel dripping from his body. "You were magnificent," she whispered, her voice thick. "I was lucky," he rasped. "No," she said. She reached up, her fingers still cool, touching the fresh, healing scar on his cheek. "You were you. You were not Lurelian. You were not him. You were human." He put his hand over hers, holding it against his face. "Kaylara." She stepped closer. She did not kiss him. She put her forehead against his, her eyes closing. He could feel her trembling. Or maybe he was the one trembling. "You shamed him," she breathed. "You shamed him with mercy. No one has ever done that. You showed them a new way. My way. Our way," he said, and his other hand found her waist, pulling her closer, until her silk robe was pressed against the cold metal of the tank, and his bare chest was pressed against her. She looked up at him, her dark obsidian eyes luminous in the dim light. "Jace," she whispered. He kissed her. It was not the desperate, angry, drunken collision of before. It was a slow, deep, devastating kiss. It was a kiss of acceptance, of surrender, of claiming. He tasted her, the salt of her skin, the lingering scent of lavender and ozone. Her hands came up, tangling in his wet hair, pulling him down. Her mouth opened against his, and a low, guttural sound, a sound of profound need, vibrated in her chest, her tail. It was no longer a symbol of his imprisonment. It was a part of her. It rose from the floor, slow, deliberate, and coiled around his torso. It was not a chain. It was an anchor. It was strong and scaled and warm, and it pulled him impossibly tight against her, fitting their bodies together. He lifted her, his arms under her legs, and carried her from the tank. The gel and the water did not matter. He carried her to the bed, to the dark silks, and followed her down. They did not talk. There was nothing left to say. There was only this. It was a storm. It was a battle. It was a surrender. It was the raw, desperate joining of two people who had been alone for so long. They had forgotten what it felt like to be touched. He learned the lines of her body, the velvet softness of her skin, the hard, coiled muscle of her tail, the way she gasped his name. A foreign, beautiful sound on her alien tongue. And she learned about him, his scars, his roughness, his humanness. She claimed him, not with law or with duty, but with her hands, her mouth, her body, and with her soul. Much, much later. They lay tangled in the silks, their bodies cooling, the twin moons of Lorelia bathing the room in a pale blue light. She was curled against his side, her head on his chest, her tail still a warm, heavy weight across his hips. He thought she was asleep. "Jace," she whispered, her voice a sleepy, contented murmur against his skin. "Yeah?" he breathed, his own voice rough with emotion. She was silent for a long moment. Then, her voice firmed, the Empress-to-be returning, but her tone was now laced with a new, dark, shared intimacy. "They'll come for you now," she said, her words a sudden cold shock in the warm room. He stiffened. "What?" She lifted her head, her dark eyes finding him in the moonlight. "Before, you were a pet, an embarrassment, a tool. They did not take you seriously." She touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "But now you won the trial. You shamed a prince of the blood, and you have claimed me, truly claimed me. They will see it. They will know I am serious. They will know we are serious." A cold dread, deeper than anything Dovar had inspired, settled in his stomach. They won't try to kill me now," she continued, her voice a deadly, quiet promise. "They will try to kill you." The morning after was a violation. Jace woke up sore, his body a map of healing aches, the scent of Kaylara still a warm, ghost-like presence in the silks. He felt different, tethered. Then the alarms blared. It was not a fire drill. It was not a hull breach. It was a deep, guttural, pulsing klaxon that Jace recognized from his darkest days in the Alliance. It was the sound of a crisis, a general assembly, the sound of a chain of command breaking. The door to his quarters burst open. Kailara's crimson-armored war maidens, led by Thala, stormed in. They were not an honor guard. They were a strike team, their glaives humming, their faces grim. "Princess." Thala's voice was granite, skipping all protocol. She was looking at Kailara, who was already on her feet, pulling on her severe dark uniform, her movements sharp, efficient. "It is the Empress. She has fallen." Jace was out of the bed in an instant, the fog of sleep and intimacy vanishing. "Fallen? Fallen how? Dead?" "She collapsed at the morning meal. Not 20 minutes ago," Thala reported, her voice tight. "The Med Primus is with her. They say she is not breathing on her own. A deep coma." Thala's dark eyes met Kailara's. "They suspect a neurotoxin." The word hung in the air. A poison dart. Kailara froze, her hand on the clasp of her tunic. Jace saw her face, the shock, the fear, and then, in an instant, the cold, calculating mask of the ruler. Who else was at the meal? Kailara's voice was flat, all emotion suppressed. "The full war council, Princess." Thala said, "Prince Dovar was in attendance, your cousin, Lycor, and your Aunt Matron, Nevaeh." Kailara's eyes met Jace's. Nevaeh. The name he had overheard outside his cell door, the replacement. "My mother is in shadow," Kailara said, her voice a low, deadly vibration. "The Vipers will be striking." She looked at Jace, her gaze intense. "My place is on the dais. Yours is at my side." The Grand Hall of Matrons was a sea of controlled panic. The usual rigid silence of the court was gone, replaced by the high, anxious keening of 1,000 nobles. They were packed onto the balconies, their silks a riot of agitated color. Kailara swept into the hall, not as a mourner, but as a conqueror. Her war maidens flanked her, and Jace walked at her right shoulder. He was wearing the black ceremonial silks of the consort, and he could feel the hatred, the suspicion, and the fear rolling off the crowd in palpable waves. He was an alien, the outsider, on the high dais. The Empress's black stone throne sat empty. It was a void, a black hole that seemed to suck all the light and sound from the vast chamber. And standing before it, a hand resting on the stone as if she already owned it, was Matron Nevaeh. Kailara's aunt was the opposite of the withered Empress Vera. Nevaeh was lush, powerful, and in the absolute prime of her life. She wore robes of a deep, dramatic purple, the color of a fresh bruise. "My people," Nevaeh's voice boomed, amplified by the hall's acoustics. It was a beautiful voice, full of rich, false grief. "A tragedy, a dark day, our Empress, our mother, our strength struck down in her own home, poisoned." A collective roar of fury and grief went up from the crowd. "But by whom?" Nevaeh cried, her performance flawless. Her eyes, sharp and black, scanned the crowd and then, with theatrical precision, they landed on Jace. She raised a single, accusing finger. "By him." Silence, absolute, crushing, and complete. 1,000 heads, 1,000 pairs of obsidian eyes, turned. Jace felt the weight of it, a physical pressure. This mammal," Nevaeh's voice cracked with practiced rage. "This foreign saboteur, he appears from the dregs of space. He defiles our most sacred rituals. He bewitches the princess air with his human heat. And on the very day of his supposed victory over our noble Prince Dovar, the Empress is struck down. An alien poison for an alien tongue." It was brilliant. Jace had to give her that. It was a perfect political assassination. He was the scapegoat, the outsider, the mammal. "Seize him," Nevaeh commanded. The palace general, A male Lorelian with a face like a scarred rock moved to obey, signaling his own gold-armored guards. No. The word cut through the vast hall, not with a shout, but with the cold, sharp authority of a vibroblade. Kailara had stepped forward. She mounted the steps of the dais, her pace slow, deliberate, each footfall an act of defiance. She stopped when she was with her aunt, the two most powerful women in the Empire, facing each in a silent battle of wills. "You dare, Aunt," Kailara said, her voice dangerously quiet, yet carrying to every corner. "I dare, niece," Nevaeh spat, her mask of grief replaced by a triumphant sneer. "I dare to protect the bloodline. You brought this filth into our home. He has done this. The evidence is plain." "The evidence is convenient," Kailara shot back. "You accuse my consort, the man who stood for me in the trial of proving, the man who saved my life from an assassin's blade. You do not just accuse him, you accuse me." The hall gasped. This was not just an accusation. This was a challenge, a blood feud, declared in public. "He is human," Nevaeh said, as if that explained everything. "He is my shield," Kailara declared, her voice ringing with a new, terrifying power Jace had never heard before. "He is my voice. He is my choice. He is mine." She took a step closer, and Nevaeh, for the first time, recoiled. "You accuse him. You accuse the honor of House Vela. You accuse the very blood that runs in my veins. This is a desperate, pathetic, and transparent bid for the throne, Aunt, and I will not allow it." She turned from her aunt to the stunned, silent crowd. "My mother lies in shadow, and in her first moment of weakness, my own blood, my aunt seeks to tear her house apart. Is this Lorelian honor, to devour our own, or is this treason?" She had them. Jace could feel the tide of the crowd shifting, the certainty wavering. Nevaeh saw it too, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. "Then you are a fool, little princess," Nevaeh snarled. "A sentimental child, blinded by an alien's touch. If you will not see justice, I will enforce it. You have both sealed your fate. Seize them both for treason." The palace general's gold-armored guards surged forward. In the same instant, Kailara's crimson war maidens, led by Thala, formed a perfect glittering ring of red armor around her and Jace, their glaives humming. "This is war, Kailara!" Nevaeh screamed, backing toward the empty throne. "You have just declared war on your own empress." "No," Kailara said, her voice cold as the void. She drew her own plasma pistol from a hip holster Jace had not even seen. "You did." She grabbed Jace's arm, her grip like steel. "Thala, to the hangars, now!" The hall erupted. It was a blur. Plasma bolts, blue and gold and red, streaked across the sacred chamber. Thala and her war maidens were a whirlwind, a disciplined, lethal storm, carving a path through the gold-armored guards. They were outnumbered, 10-1, but they were hers. They ran, down ancient corridors of black stone, through service tunnels Jace had never seen. Alarms were blaring, no longer a general klaxon, but a specific one. Jace saw his own face, grainy and menacing, flash on an internal screen. Jace Thorne, fugitive, traitor, to be killed on sight. "They're locking down the main hangars," Thala yelled over the comms, firing a precise 3-shot burst that dropped 2 guards behind them. "Not the main hangars," Jace panted, his mind racing, the old feral instincts of the gutter runner taking over. He grabbed Kailara's hand and pulled her left, down a dark, unused passage. "Where do you keep the old ships? The private ones? The toys?" Kailara's eyes lit with a dark fire. "The Spire Vault, this way." They burst into a high, circular chamber, dark and filled with the dust of decades. It was a museum of royal ships. One, a sleek, blade-like courier, matte black and shaped like a drawn breath, sat under a tattered silk cover. It was old, pre-alliance, but Jace could see the lines. It was not a toy. It was fast. "That one," Jace said, vaulting up the ramp and into the cockpit. The systems were archaic, analog, but the energy readings were full. "Get in. Thala, you have to buy us time." "It will be my honor, Princess," Thala said, her face a mask of fierce, terrible joy. She and her remaining war maidens turned, forming a crimson line at the door, to face the oncoming wave of gold armor. "Thala, no!" Kalara cried, her hand on the ramp. "Go!" Thala roared, her voice echoing in the vault. "Find the truth. We will hold the line, for the true Empress." Jace did not wait. He grabbed Kalara by the waist and physically threw her into the co-pilot's seat. "Strap in. Now!" He slammed his hands on the console. The twin engines whined, then roared to life, a deep, predatory sound. "They've sealed the bay doors," Kalara yelled, pointing to the massive multi-ton blast doors that had slid shut, sealing them in. "Then we make our own," Jace growled. He diverted all power to the forward shields and the main thrusters. "Hold on." He did not take off. He launched the Courier, a ship built for pure high-velocity running, shot across the hangar like a mass driver round. It struck the massive stained-glass viewport at the far end of the vault. The shields flared. The ancient ship screamed in protest. And then they were through. They burst out into the Lorelian sky, a million shards of ancient, priceless glass glittering in their wake. Below them, the city sprawled. Above them, 2 Imperial cruisers were already lifting off from the main military pads to intercept. "They're locking weapons," Kalara shouted, her knuckles white on her console. "Not for long," Jace gritted. "They can't hit what they can't track." He threw the ship into a near-vertical dive, straight toward the planet's crowded, multi-leveled capital city. He weaved under a civilian transport barge, banked hard around a spire, and plunged into the deep, artificial canyons of the lower city. Behind them, the massive cruisers were too big, too slow to follow. "They'll have the system locked down in minutes," Jace said, his voice hard, his eyes scanning every building. "Where can we go? Where do we go where they can't follow? Where do you go when you can't go home?" Kalara was staring at her hands, her body trembling. "This is all my fault. My mother, she's—" "Hey!" Jace's voice was sharp, a slap. "Focus. Your mother is in a coma. Your aunt just tried to have you killed. This was an inside job." Her head snapped up, the grief shattered by confusion. "What did you say?" "Think about it," Jace said, pulling the ship into a high-G turn that made the hull groan. "Dovar was a distraction. This is the real play, the poison. That's a family thing. It was always a family thing. The person on that council who didn't drink the poison is the person who served it." Kalara's face went pale, then ashen. "Nevaeh, at the meal. She was complaining of a stomach ailment. She drank only water. She said the wine was too acidic." "There it is," Jace said grimly. "Now we need proof. We need somewhere to go, someone you trust, someone outside the system." Kalara was silent for a long moment, her dark eyes staring into the blur of the city. Then, she looked at him, her face set. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. "Xylos Prime, the jungle moon, in the outer rings. It's a quarantine zone. Officially, no one goes there." "Quarantine?" "A failed terraforming experiment. A biological agent took over." She gave him the coordinates. "They are friends from the academy. Renegades. Scientists." "Scientists. Good," Jace said, punching in the coordinates. He angled the ship toward the local sun, running on silent, hiding in the star's radiation. And then, when he was clear, he hit the hyperdrive. The stars stretched, and Lorelia, their prison and their home, vanished. Xylos Prime was a miserable, humid, green hell. The atmosphere was so thick with spores and fungal static that it made sensors useless. Jace brought the courier down in a muddy, rain-lashed clearing, the canopy of the massive purple-leaf trees so thick it was like landing at night. As they stepped out into the air, which smelled like rotting flowers and ozone, Kalara grabbed his arm. "Wait!" A plasma bolt, fired from a nearby ridge, zapped the mud where Jace had been about to step. "You're late, Princess," a sharp female voice called from the canopy. "And you brought a stray." Two figures emerged from the dripping foliage. They were Lorelian, but not. They wore patched, practical lab coats over scavenged armor. One was a female with bright, amber-colored eyes, her tail wrapped in a tool belt. The other was a thin, nervous-looking male who kept adjusting his spectacles. "Jace Thorne, this is Dr. Alara Veason and Dr. Ren Veason," Kalara said, her voice softer, more relaxed than Jace had ever heard it. "Renegades," Alara clarified, her amber eyes scanning Jace with a mix of suspicion and amusement. "We disagreed with the Imperial doctrine on ethical biological warfare. Kalara, in her infinite wisdom, funded our quarantine here. They're the two most brilliant biochemists in the Empire," Kalara said. "They were my friends, before she became an Ice Queen," Ilara finished, with a grin that held no malice. "Come on, a spore storm is rolling in, and you look like hell. Both of you." Their lab was a retrofitted, crashed and buried cargo freighter, shielded from scans by 10 meters of fungal-infested rock. It was a chaotic marvel of high-tech equipment, salvaged parts, and pure, unadulterated genius. "So," Ren said, his hands fluttering over his console. "Empress in a coma, Aunt Matron Nevea claims the throne, and you two are fugitives of the state. Did I miss anything?" "The poison," Kalara said, her voice urgent. She produced a small, silver locket from her boot. "I managed to get a sample, from my mother's cup, the Med Primus he's loyal to. He slipped it to me before Nevea's guards took over." Ilara's amused expression vanished. She took the locket with a reverent, clinical care. "A sample. Kalara, you are a treasure. Ren, prep the mass spectrometer. This is elegant, the molecular structure, and familiar. This is old. Kalara, old Empire tech." "How long?" Kalara asked. "To decode? To find a signature? 12 hours, maybe 14? Go." "Rest," Ilara said, her amber eyes softening. "You're wounded." Jace looked. Kalara's uniform was dark, but on her left side, it was darker. She had a plasma graze from the hangar fight. They were given a small, private quarter, a former cargo hold, pressurized and clean. It was sparse, a cot, a table, a single light. The moment the door hissed shut, Kalara sagged against the bulkhead, her composure finally shattering. Jace saw the dark stain. "You're hit. It's nothing," she said, her voice hollow. "It's not nothing," Jace said, his old Sergeant Thorne voice taking over. "Sit." He pushed her onto the cot and, without ceremony, tore the fabric of her uniform. It was worse than a graze. The plasma had seared the armor weave, melting it into the skin. "This is going to hurt," Jace said, grabbing a med kit from the wall. "It all hurts." "Jace," she whispered, her voice small. He began to clean the wound, his touch, learned from a dozen battlefields, surprisingly gentle. He worked in silence, applying the antiseptic, then the debriding gel. She winced, her body tensing, her tail lashing once in silent pain, but she did not make a sound. "He did this. You know, she said, her voice so quiet he barely heard it. Jace's hands still. Nevea? No. She was staring at the gray metal wall, but seeing something years in the past. Lyran, my first consort, the one I told you about, the one who betrayed me. Jace said nothing. He kept cleaning. He was charming, beautiful. He said he loved me. I was 19. I believed him. A single hot tear tracked down her cheek. I trusted him. I showed him everything, my private passages, my personal comm codes. I told him about my renegade scientist friends on Xylos Prime. Jace's blood ran cold. He was a spy, Kalara continued, her voice dead. For my aunt, for Nevea. She placed him with me, to map my life, to find my weaknesses, and I gave him everything, and when my mother found out, she had him executed. But she made me watch. She was shaking, a deep, racking tremor. She made me watch, Jace, to teach me a lesson. This is the price of sentiment, she said. This is what trust gets you. And I locked it all away. I built the walls. I became the ice. I vowed never again. Jace finished dressing the wound. He wrapped a clean white bandage around her torso. He looked at her, at this woman who had been raised in a cage of vipers. His heart, a thing he thought was long dead, ached. She was wrong, he said, his voice a low rumble. Kalara looked up, her dark eyes swimming. She was right. I trusted you. And now, my mother is— No, Jace said, his hands moving from her wound to her shoulders. He gripped her, forcing her to look at him. This is not your fault. You are not weak. You are not sentimental. You are— A low rumble shook the freighter. It was not an attack. The lights flickered. The spore storm, Kalara whispered, a new primal fear in her voice. The atmosphere ionizes. The sound grew, from a rumble to a roar, a high, keening shriek, as the planet's fungal-charged atmosphere raged. The lights in their small room died, plunging them into absolute darkness, replaced a second later by the dim, red emergency lights. Kalara let out a small, terrified sound. Her hand, a reflex, found his. Her fingers were ice cold. It's just a storm. Kalara, Jace said, his voice a calm anchor in the dark. I hate this, she whispered, her voice trembling. The darkness, the noise. It sounds like the crowd. After Lyran. Hey! Jace moved from his crouch to sit beside her on the cot. He did not let go of her hand. It's just a storm. It can't get in. She was shaking, her control completely gone. I am not what you think I am. Jace, you see me as strong, as an empress. But I am too much. What? I am too passionate, she said, the words a torrent, a confession held back for a lifetime. I feel everything. Too much. My mother hates it. She says it is a weakness. I love it very much. I hate it too much. I want too much. I am a storm. Jace, and I destroy everything I care about. She was crying now, the raw, ugly, desperate sobs of someone who had never been allowed to. Jace said nothing. He pulled her to him. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight as the alien storm screamed outside, holding her as she fell apart. So be a storm, he whispered into her hair, his voice rough. Be too much. He tilted her chin up, his face inches from hers in the dim, red light. I'm not Lyran, I'm not your mother, I am not afraid of what you are. You should be, she breathed. No, he said, because I'm just as broken. And he kissed her. This was not the victory of the trial. This was not the shock of the first touch. This was something else. It was raw. It was desperate. It was an affirmation. It was two broken, fugitive souls, hiding in the dark, clinging to the only solid thing in the universe. He laid her back on the cot. Their tattered uniforms were a hindrance, torn and discarded in the red gloom. The storm was their soundtrack, a raging symphony that matched the desperation inside them. This was a promise. That in spite of everything, the poison, the aunt, the trial, the past, they were still here. They were still breathing. They were still real. He made love to her, slowly, deeply, as the world tore itself apart outside. He kissed the tears from her cheeks, and she wrapped her tail around his leg, not as a chain, but as a lifeline, anchoring him, grounding him, claiming him as her own. Much later, in the exhausted, panting silence of the aftermath, the door chimed, Ilara's voice carefully neutral. "Princess, the storm is over, and we have it." They dressed, their movements slow, sore, but changed. They walked into the main lab, hand in hand, a gesture that, for Ilara, was more public, more defiant than any speech. Ilara and Ren were pale, their eyes wide. "Jace," Ilara said, her voice grim. "You were right. The poison, it's a modified version of the Vela blood toxin. A family-specific agent. Only someone with direct access to the Imperial genetic archives can synthesize it." And Ren pointed to the screen, a complex molecule, spinning. "We found a marker, a signature, not just Nevaeh's. She did not do this alone." A second signature spun into view, an insignia Jace did not recognize, but Ilara did. She breathed. The Kraler Syndicate. "A rival galactic power," Jace said, remembering the name from his smuggling days. "Arms dealers, slavers." "It's a trade," Ren stammered, his fingers flying. "The poison in exchange for this." He brought up a new file. A map of the Lorelian Empire's weak points. A full invasion plan. "She did not just try to kill my mother," Ilara said, her voice a low, deadly vibration. "She is selling our entire empire to our oldest enemy, all for a stone chair." "We have to send this to the council," Jace said. "To Thala. To someone." "No," Ilara said, her voice absolute. The transformation was complete. The crying girl in the storm was gone. The Empress was here. "The council is compromised. Nevaeh's spies are everywhere. If we send this, they will destroy it. They will destroy us, and they will hunt you for the rest of your life. They will never stop. She will never stop. As long as you are my weakness." He saw her decision, clear and terrible in her eyes. "Ilara, no," he said, we can't run." "I am not running," she said. She stood there, her uniform in tatters, her hair a wild mess, her eyes burning with the cold fire of a distant star. She touched his face, her hand, for the first time, warm and steady. "I am not protecting my crown," she said. "I am going back to protect you, and I am going back to end this." "Ilara." "I am going back," she said, her voice steel. "To kill my aunt." Lorelia did not look like a home anymore. From the view screen of the stolen courier ship, now repainted a dull, cosmic gray to match the endless drifts of space debris, the capital planet looked like a fortress. Blockade ships hung in orbit like vultures, their scanning beams sweeping the darkness. Jace Thorne sat in the pilot seat, his hands steady on the controls, though his heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He adjusted the transponder signal Ren had coded for them. According to the ship's new identity, they were the Void Runner, a heavy freight hauler carrying rare isotopes and a mercenary escort. Beside him, Ilara Vela was gone. In her place sat a woman named Mira. Her face was hidden behind a heavy synthetic veil used by deep space pilgrims, and her posture was slumped, subservient. Jace wore the battered, scarred armor of an outer rim gun for hire, his face unshaven, his demeanor radiating bored violence. They passed the first checkpoint. A voice crackled over the comms, demanding clearance codes. Jace answered, his voice dropping into a rough, gravelly drawl he had not used since his days running contraband out of the Terminus systems. He sounded impatient, rude, and entirely convincing. The blockade ship hesitated, then waved them through. They landed in the commercial sector, far from the royal spire. The city was tense. Gold-armored guards, Nevaeh's personal legion, patrolled the streets in squads of 10. Propaganda holograms played on every corner, showing Nevaeh's tear-streaked face as she mourned the falling of the Empress and promised swift justice against the foreign saboteur. They moved through the shadows of the lower levels, heading for the old service tunnels Kailara had used as a child. The air smelled of ozone and fear. Kailara moved with a silent, lethal grace beneath her pilgrim's robes. She led him to a rusted grate in a dead-end alley. Jace pulled it open, the metal groaning in protest. They descended into the dark. The tunnels were a maze of dripping pipes and scurrying vermin, but they led straight up into the heart of the palace. They emerged hours later in the ventilation shafts above the royal archives. This was the nerve center of the Empire, the place where history was recorded and, more importantly, where secret communications were stored before deletion. Jace dropped down first, landing silently on the polished obsidian floor. Kailara followed. The room was vast, lit only by the blue hum of the data towers. Ren's decryption algorithm loaded onto a portable drive, sliced through the security firewalls in seconds. Kailara's fingers flew across the interface, searching for the timestamp of the poisoning. She found it. A holographic recording flickered to life in the center of the room. It was grainy, but the figures were unmistakable. Nevaeh stood in her private chambers, speaking to a towering reptilian figure projected on a wall screen. A Kraler warlord. The audio was crisp. "I have administered the agent," Nevaeh said, her voice dripping with ambition. "The Empress will not wake. The blame has been cast upon the human. The court is in chaos." "Excellent," the warlord hissed. "And the girl? She will be executed for treason," Nevaeh replied. "But the human left him for me." Jace stiffened. The warlord laughed, a wet, guttural sound. "Do you have a taste for mammals?" "He is a curiosity," Nevaeh said, a cruel smile twisting her lips. "He has broken Kailara. He has touched her soul. I want him. I will break him in front of her before she dies. I will make him my pet, just to show the galaxy that everything she loves belongs to me. Then, once the throne is mine, I will give you the outer defense codes as agreed." The recording ended. Silence filled the vault. Kailara stared at the empty space where her aunt's image had been. Her face was pale, but her eyes were dry. The grief she had felt on the jungle moon was gone, burned away by a white-hot fury. "She wants to humiliate me," Kailara whispered. "She does not just want the crown. She wants to erase me." "She wants a pet," Jace said, his voice low and dangerous. He checked the charge on his plasma pistol. "She is going to be disappointed." Kailara downloaded the file. "This is it. The proof. If we broadcast this, the military will turn on her. The people will tear the palace apart. But we need a transmitter," Jace noted. "And the only one strong enough to override the royal jammer is in the throne room." Kailara looked at the time on the console. Tonight is the masquerade of the moons. It was supposed to be a celebration of peace. Now, Nevaeh has turned it into a mourning gala. She will be there. The entire court will be there. And so will we. Jace said. The theft of the costumes was the easy part. The palace laundry was overflowing with silks and velvets for the guests. They stole 2 outfits from a preparation rack destined for a minor noble house. Jace dressed in the black, heavy robes of a Nightwalker, a mythical Lorelian spirit of vengeance. The mask covered his entire face, leaving only his eyes visible through narrow slits. Kailara chose a gown of shimmering liquid gold, the color of the rising sun, the color of rebirth. Her mask was a delicate avian thing, covering the upper half of her face but leaving her mouth free. They walked into the grand ballroom right through the front doors, flashing the stolen invitations. The ballroom was a sea of subdued opulence. Thousands of nobles moved in slow, rhythmic circles, their voices hushed. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies, the flower of royal death. At the far end of the room, on a raised dais, Nevaeh sat on a temporary throne, drinking from a goblet of wine, watching the dancers with the eyes of a predator. The music started, a slow, haunting waltz played by a live orchestra of glass flutes. "Dance with me," Jace said, offering his hand. Kailara took it. "We need to get closer to the dais. The control console for the main broadcast array is behind the throne." They moved onto the floor. Jace was not a dancer, but Kailara was. She guided him, her hand firm on his shoulder, her body moving with a fluid precision that made him look graceful by association. They spun through the crowd, moving closer to the woman who wanted them dead. The tension was electric. Every turn brought them face to face with potential enemies. Guards lined the walls, their eyes scanning the crowd for threats. But they were looking for a fugitive cargo pilot and a desperate princess, not two nobles in high-fashion mourning wear. "You are trembling," Jace whispered, his hand tightening on her waist as he dipped her. "I am terrified," Kailara admitted, her voice steady despite the words. "But I am also ready." They were 10 meters from the throne. 5. Suddenly, Nevaeh stood up. The music stopped abruptly. The dancers froze. Nevaeh descended the steps of the dais, her purple robes trailing behind her. She walked straight toward them. She did not look at anyone else. She stopped 3 feet away. "A lovely dance," Nevaeh said, her voice projecting to the entire silent room. "But the steps are familiar. Too familiar." She reached out and ripped the mask from Kailara's face. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Kailara stood revealed, her head held high, her golden dress blazing under the chandeliers. "And you," Nevaeh sneered, turning to Jace. She did not pull off his mask. She simply signaled the guards. Dozens of gold-armored soldiers materialized from the crowd, their weapons drawn and leveled at Jace and Kailara. "Did you truly think you could hide from me in my own house?" Nevaeh laughed, a sharp, victorious sound. "I have heat sensors in the doorway. I knew it was you the moment you entered." She turned to the crowd, spreading her arms. "Behold, the traitors return, drawn back to the scene of their crime like moths to a flame. Execute them," Nevaeh commanded, bored. "Do it now." Before the court, the guards raised their glaives. "Stop," Jace roared. He ripped off his own mask, throwing it to the floor. He did not look like a frightened pilot. He looked like a soldier. "I invoke the Code of Vela," Jace shouted, his voice booming off the vaulted ceiling. "Article 7, Section 4. The guards hesitated. The code was sacred, drilled into them from birth. Nevaeh froze, her eyes narrowing. "What babble is this? A bonded consort cannot be executed without a tribunal of the blood if the succession is contested." Jace recited the words Kailara had taught him during their flight, the ancient legal shield that every Lorelian respected above all else. "To kill me now, without trial, while the Empress lives in shadow, is to declare yourself lawless. It is to declare yourself a usurper." The crowd murmured. The guards lowered their weapons slightly, looking at each other. To break the code was to lose their honor. You have no rights here, mammal, Nevaeh shrieked, her composure cracking. I have every right. Jace stepped forward, placing himself between Kailara and the guards. I am the bonded consort of the heir. I won the trial of proving. By your own laws, I am the blood of this house until death unbinds me. And I demand the right to speak. Nevaeh's face twisted. Kill him. I command you. The guards did not move. They looked at the nobles, who were watching with wide, judging eyes. If Nevaeh forced them to kill a man who had invoked Article 7, she would lose the support of the aristocracy instantly. She hesitated. That was her mistake. Now. Kailara, Jace yelled. Kailara pulled the data drive from her bodice and threw it, not at Nevaeh, but at the console behind the throne. It was a perfect throw. The drive magnetized to the port and the hack Ren had designed executed instantly. The massive holographic screens that lined the ballroom walls, usually reserved for scenic vistas, flickered and changed. Nevaeh's face appeared 10 meters tall. I will give you the outer defense codes as agreed, the giant Nevaeh said to the Krayler warlord. The ballroom erupted. Nevaeh stared at the screen, the blood draining from her face. The audio boomed through the hall. The nobles screamed in outrage. Treason! The word started as a whisper and became a chant. Nevaeh looked around, trapped. She saw the guards turning toward her. She saw the hatred in the eyes of her subjects. You fools! She screamed, pulling a communicator from her belt. I tried to save you. She spoke into the device. Attack! Destroy the city! Level it all! Sirens began to wail. The ground shook. Above the palace, the sky turned red. The Krayler fleet, hiding in the shadow of the moon, had dropped out of stealth. A turbo laser fire began to rain down on the capital. The ballroom dissolved into chaos. Nobles fled in panic. Kailara's loyalists who had been hiding in the crowd suddenly engaged the gold-armored guards, confused and leaderless. Jace! Kailara shouted over the noise of exploding masonry. The defense grid. Nevaeh shut it down. We are sitting ducks. I'm on it, Jace yelled back. He looked at her. The aunt was drawing a jagged ceremonial sword. Her eyes locked on Kailara. Can you handle her? Go, Kailara commanded, drawing 2 concealed energy batons from beneath her golden skirt. Save my city. I will handle my family. Jace turned and ran. He did not run for the exit. He ran for the service lift that led to the gunnery spire. He sprinted through corridors that were shaking with the impact of orbital bombardment. Dust rained from the ceiling. He burst onto the gunnery deck. The crew was dead, executed by Nevaeh's loyalists before the ball. Jace jumped into the master control seat. The console was dead, locked out. Come on, he muttered, his fingers flying over the manual overrides. He didn't have codes. He had mechanics. He ripped the panel off the underside of the console and hot-wired the firing circuit, bypassing the computer entirely. The system roared to life. Jace grabbed the dual control sticks. The holographic display showed the sky above the palace. It was filled with Krayler raiders, diving like hawks on the defenseless city. Not today, Jace growled. He swung the massive planetary defense ion cannons around. He did not use the targeting computer, it was too slow. He used his eyes. He used the instincts that had kept him alive in asteroid fields and smuggling runs. He led the target, a massive cruiser descending on the refugee district. He squeezed the triggers. 2 beams of pure blue energy, thick as skyscrapers, lanced up from the palace spire. They slammed into the cruiser's engines. The ship detonated in a fireball that lit up the night, turning the darkness into day. Jace spun the turret. He picked off a bomber wing. He shattered a frigate. He was a virtuoso of destruction, playing the massive cannons like an instrument. Back in the ballroom, The battle was smaller, but no less deadly. Kailara and Nevaeh circled each other in the center of the ruined floor. Nevaeh swung the heavy sword with hysterical strength, screaming insults. Kailara parried with her batons, her movements tight, economical. "You were always weak," Nevaeh shrieked, her blade sparking against Kailara's baton. "Your mother knew it. I knew it. You are soft." Kailara ducked a strike that would have taken her head off. She spun low, her tail sweeping Nevaeh's legs, knocking the older woman off balance. "I am not soft," Kailara said, her voice calm. "I am just not cruel." She struck. One baton slammed into Nevaeh's wrist, shattering the bone. The sword clattered to the floor. The second baton struck Nevaeh's chest, sending her sprawling backward onto the steps of the dais. Nevaeh gasped, clutching her chest, looking up at her niece. "Finish it!" Nevaeh spat blood on her teeth. "Prove you have the stomach for it. Kill me." Kailara stood over her, the baton raised. The chaos of the battle raged around them, but in this circle, there was only silence. Kailara looked at the woman who had tormented her, who had poisoned her mother, who had sold her people. "No," Kailara said. She lowered the weapon. "I will not kill you. You will live. You will stand trial, and you will rot in a cell, watching as I rebuild everything you tried to destroy." She turned her back on her aunt. It was the mistake of a noble soul. Nevaeh's face contorted with hate. She reached into her boot. She pulled out a small, silver needle pistol. "I will not rot!" Nevaeh screamed. She aimed at Kailara's exposed back. Kailara heard the movement. She began to turn, but she was too slow. The distance was too short. The glass window of the balcony above shattered inward. A single shot rang out. Not the high whine of a needle pistol, but the thunderous crack of a heavy slug thrower. Nevaeh's head snapped back. The needle pistol fired harmlessly into the ceiling as she collapsed, dead before she hit the floor. Kailara froze. She looked up. Jace stood on the high gunnery balcony, smoke curling from the barrel of a long-range kinetic rifle he had pulled from the armory rack. He was breathing hard, sweat streaking the soot on his face. He lowered the rifle. He looked at Kailara. His eyes were dark, hard, and absolutely unapologetic. "I'm not a noble," Jace called down, his voice echoing in the sudden silence of the room. He vaulted over the railing, using a tapestry to slide down to the floor. He walked over to Nevaeh's body, kicked the pistol away, and then stepped over her to reach Kailara. He took her face in his hands, checking her for wounds. "You gave her a chance," Jace said gently. "That's who you are." He glanced at the dead woman. "And I made sure she didn't take it. That's who I am." Kailara looked at him, shaking. Then she collapsed against his chest, burying her face in his neck. Outside, the Kraler fleet, broken by the defense cannons and seeing their leader dead, began to retreat into hyperspace. The silence returned to the palace. But this time, it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. The Empress Vera died on the 5th day. The poison, insidious and deep, had anchored itself in her nervous system. When the Kraler fleet retreated, the shockwave of the defense grid's reboot, combined with the profound betrayal, had been too much. The old Empress, the iron-willed matriarch of the stars, slipped from coma into death. The black stone throne was empty. Kailara Vela, now Empress-to-be, stood in the center of her mother's chambers. The room was cold, smelling of antiseptic and the dry scent of lilies. Jace stood by the doorway, a silent, armored sentinel, watching the woman he loved inherit a broken, smoking, and terrified empire. "She never woke," Kailara said, her voice a hollow whisper. She touched the cold silk sheet on her mother's empty bed. "I never got to ask her if she ever approves." She approved of strength. Kalara, Jace said, his voice a low rumble in the silence. You held the line. You saved her city. You won. She approved. Kalara turned to him. She was not in her golden gown, nor her uniform. She was in simple black mourning robes. She looked exhausted, small, and terrifyingly powerful. Jace Thorn, she said, and her voice was no longer small. It was the voice of a ruler, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 star systems. You are a hero of Lurelia. By my authority as Empress, your name is cleared. All charges, all accusations are expunged from the Imperial record. Your ship, the Gilded Gutter, has been retrieved from impound. It has been repaired, refueled, and rearmed to your original specifications. Jace's heart thudded, a slow, heavy beat. Kalara. She raised her hand. Furthermore, the Imperial Treasury has been instructed to compensate you for your service. A data chit has been prepared. She gestured to a small silver drive on the table. The sum is significant, enough to buy your own small moon, as you once said. He stared at the chit. This was it, the deal, the escape. Everything he had wanted when this nightmare began. What are you saying? He asked, though he already knew. Kalara's face was a mask of perfect cold control. The Ice Queen was back, but he knew, now, that it was a mask built to hide a breaking heart. You are free, she said, her voice flat. The bargain is complete. You have earned your life, and your ship. The mating bond was declared under duress, under a lie. Kalara Vela, Empress of the Lurelian Ascendancy, do hereby release you from all oaths, all bonds, and all obligations. She turned away from him, staring out the viewport at the damaged city. You are a free man, Jace Thorn. You may leave whenever you wish. The hangars are open to you. He stood there, frozen. This was his victory, his freedom. He had won. He could walk away. He could go back to his life. He walked over to the table. He picked up the data chit, the cold metal heavy in his palm. He looked at her back, at the rigid line of her spine, at the proud, scaled tail that was deliberately, painfully, still. He walked out of the room without another word. He walked through the palace. The Lurelian guards, the Crimson War Maidens, saw him. They did not stop him. They saluted him. Thala was at the main door, her face a mask of respect. She nodded to him. Once. Pilot, she said. He walked to the hangars. There, sitting in the royal bay, was the Gilded Gutter. It was beautiful. She was not a rust bucket anymore. The hull plating was new. The engines gleamed. The cockpit glass was polished. It was the ship he had always dreamed of. He climbed the ramp. The air inside was the same. His old leather pilot's chair, the familiar smell of hydraulic fluid and recycled air. This was his home. He sat in the chair. He powered up the console. The screens came to life, blue and familiar. He could be off-planet in 5 minutes, gone. Free. He stared at the empty co-pilot's seat beside him. He thought of her face when he had quoted the Article 7. He thought of her hand in his during the spore storm. He thought of her, straddling him, whispering, I choose this. He powered down the console. The ship sighed, the lights dying. It's just a ship, he whispered to the empty, silent cockpit. He stood up, and for the first time, he did not feel like a pilot or a smuggler. He walked out of the gutter, down the ramp, and did not look back. The coronation was a solemn, ancient, and necessary affair. The grand hall of matrons had been cleared of debris. The blood had been scrubbed from the black marble. The shattered tapestries were gone. The air was thick with sacred ozone and the aroma of 10,000 grieving nobles. Kailara Vela stood at the foot of the dais. She was draped in the robes of the first empress, a 1,000-year-old garment of woven starlight and dark matter. Her hair was bound in the empress's crown, a heavy, intimidating web of black crystal. She looked magnificent. She looked regal. And she looked utterly, completely, and devastatingly alone. The high priest, the same ancient one who had presided over her affirmation, began the final intonation. In the shadow of our mother's passing, a new light ascends. Kailara Vela, daughter of Vera, blood of the first, comes to the black stone throne alone. Kailara took the first step. Clank. A sound. A sharp, metallic clank from the back of the hall. It was not a weapon, it was armor. The crowd turned. The high priest stopped, his mouth open, an act of sacrilege. Jace Thorne stood in the great doorway. He was not in his flight jacket. He was not in borrowed silks. He was wearing a suit of Lorelian assault armor, custom forged, gleaming in jet black with crimson piping. It was the uniform of the prince consort, and on his left hip, a perfectly crafted, articulated, armored plate was fastened, designed to rest lightly on the tail of the empress when he stood beside her. It was the tail-touched armor of a bonded mate. He walked down the center aisle. The nobles, Dovar, Lycor, all of them, stared, their jaws slack. The war maidens, lining the aisle, broke protocol. They slammed their glaives to the floor in a booming rhythmic salute as he passed. Kailara was frozen. Her hand was over her mouth, her obsidian eyes wide, glistening with tears that she had refused to shed for her mother, for her crown, for her aunt, but could not stop for him. Jace did not stop until he was at the foot of the dais. He walked right past the fuming high priest and stood in front of her. He was a soldier. She was his queen. "Jace," she whispered, her voice a tiny, broken thing. "What are you doing? I released you." He grinned, a rough, tired, absolutely Jace-like grin. "Yeah, well, I'm invoking Article 7, Section 4. You're in a contested succession, Your Highness. You can't get rid of your bonded consort. It's illegal." You crazy human fool," she sobbed, a laugh mixing with the tears. "Look," Jace said, and his voice, though low, was heard by every noble in the silent hall. "I went to my ship. I sat in the chair, and I realized my ship is small and cold, and you're not in it." He took a breath, and his grin softened. "Besides, I accidentally touched your butt." Kailara stared at him. "By law," Jace finished, his voice ringing with a new, strange kind of honor. "That means we're engaged for life. Guess I'm stuck." She did not wait. She broke, the empress of 1,000 suns in front of her entire court. Let out a laugh that was a sob and a cry of pure, undiluted joy. She threw herself off the step and into his arms. His armored embrace closed around her. She was clinging to him, her heavy robes bunched in his fists, her face buried in his neck. And then, the entire court gasped. Kailara Vela, the new empress, wrapped her long, scaled royal tail around his armored waist, pulling him so tight he grunted, claiming him, binding him in front of the gods and everyone. "So," the high priest stammered, looking from the throne to the couple. "She does not come alone?" Jace looked up from Kailara's hair. "She does not." He tilted her chin up. "You're all right, Empress?" "I am now," she breathed. "Good." He kissed her. He did not kiss her like a consort. He kissed her like a husband. He kissed her like a man who had been to hell and back, who had walked away from freedom to find a home. It was a deep, passionate, and profoundly disrespectful kiss, and it sealed the fate of the empire, The court was silent for one stunned second. Then Thala, in the front row, slammed her glaive down. Boom! And then the entire hall of war maidens, and then the nobles, and then even Prince Dovar, with a grudging, surprised smile, joined in. The grand hall erupted in a deafening, thunderous roar of approval. 1 Laurelian year later, Ambassador Consort Jace Thorne stood on the observation deck of the Imperial flagship, the Horizon. He hated the formal, high-collared Laurelian jacket he was wearing, but he had to admit it was well cut. "The Gorlak hegemony will not accept apologies, Your Highness," a stuffy, old-blood noble Lord Kale was saying, his voice a droning buzz. "Your mother's legions took their moon. To offer it back with reparations, it shows weakness." Empress Kalara sat at the head of the conference table, her fingers steepled. She looked tired. Rebuilding a galaxy was harder than conquering one. "Lord Kale," she said, her voice a calm, cool river. "My mother's way led to war. My way leads to allies. The Gorlaks are a proud people. We wounded them. We will heal them." "They will see it as soft," Kale snarled. "Then they do not know my wife," Jace said, his voice cutting through the room. Everyone turned. Jace leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. "Lord Kale, I was a soldier. I've seen hard and soft. Hard is easy. Hard is just shooting. Soft is what my Empress is doing. Soft is walking into your enemy's house and offering to fix what your family broke. That takes a kind of strength you clearly do not understand. So sit down and let her work." Lord Kale turned a mottled purple. Kailara hid a small, proud smile. The Gorlak leader, a massive, rock-skinned being, grunted. He looked at Jace, then at Kailara. "Humans are loud, but his words have weight. We will listen to your soft proposal. Empress." Kailara had won. That night, in their private chambers, the Horizon slipped through hyperspace. Jace was sitting in the command chair, rubbing his neck, the stiff collar finally discarded. Kailara entered her royal robe shed, wearing only a simple dark blue silk robe. The door hissed shut, sealing them in their private world. "Ambassador Consort Thorne," she purred, her voice low and intimate. She came up behind him, her hands, cool and strong, beginning to massage his shoulder. "You were magnificent, punching people with words. You are surprisingly diplomatic." "I'm just translating," Jace rumbled, leaning his head back into her touch. "You do the hard work. I just watch your back." Her hands stilled. He pulled her around gently until she was standing in front of him. He pulled her onto his lap. She straddled him, her silk-clad legs on either side of his, her royal robes pooling around his hips, her tail, her beautiful blue-scaled tail, coiled around the chair, claiming it, claiming him. She put her forehead against his, her dark hair falling around them like a curtain. "It is difficult, Jace," she whispered, her voice vulnerable. "The Empress gone. My own people, they fight me, they still call me soft. They still do not trust this." "I trust you," he said, his hands finding her waist, his thumbs rubbing small, slow circles. "You're not soft. You're a damn supernova. You're changing the galaxy. It's terrifying. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I choose this, Kailara," he said, his voice rough. "Every day, I choose the stiff collars, the boring meetings, and the assassination attempts. I chose this. Us." She smiled, a slow, radiant, human smile. She leaned in, her lips brushing his. "I choose this," she whispered, and she kissed him, a deep, slow promise that sealed their political victory and their personal one. They were on a diplomatic mission to a colony on the Kraler border, 6 months later. The war had left deep scars. They were touring a hybrid orphanage, a place for the children left behind, the children who belonged to neither side. Jace was watching Kaylara, his heart aching with a pride that was still new. She was a natural empress. She spoke, and worlds listened. Then, she stopped. In the corner of the chaotic playroom, a small child sat alone, a girl, maybe 4, maybe 5 years old. She was a hybrid, part Lorelian, with pale violet skin, but with a shock of fiery human red hair. She was tiny, dirty, and had her arms wrapped around her knees. Kaylara walked over. The child's head snapped up. Her eyes were not sad. They were furious. She glared at the Empress of the Galaxy with pure, unadulterated defiance. Kaylara knelt, her expensive robes pooling in the dust. The child hissed. "You are very strong," Kaylara said, her voice soft. The child said nothing. "You are very alone," Kaylara whispered. The child's glare faltered, just for a second, a flicker of pain in her eyes. Jace walked over. He knelt beside his wife. "Hey, kid," he said. "Name's Jace. She's Kaylara. We know what that feels like." The child looked at him, then at Kaylara, at her tail, at his human face. She looked at the two of them, the impossible pairing. "What's your name?" Kaylara asked. "Don't have one," the girl spat. Kaylara smiled. "We have a friend, a warrior. Her name is Thala. It means fierce heart. Would you like that name?" The girl's eyes widened. "Thala," she tried the word. "Thala," Kaylara confirmed. She held out her hand. "Would you like to come home, Thala?" The old nobles were scandalized. An empress, adopting a no-name hybrid war orphan, it was a disgrace. The people, the soldiers, the war maidens, the families of the lower city wept with joy. They saw not just an empress. They saw a woman, a mother, a lover. They saw a family. Jace stood on the bridge of the horizon. The ship was quiet, the night cycle crew moving with silent efficiency. Kaylara was beside him, her hand in his. They were staring out the main viewport at a swirling, newborn nebula, a spiral of pink and gold light. On a nearby console, their daughter, Thala, was fast asleep, her red hair a shock of color against the dark blue padding. She was small, but her tail, a perfect miniature version of her mother's, was curled around her knees. He had done a lot of things: a soldier, a smuggler, a prisoner, a consort. When he first landed on Venel 7, he was just a broken man looking for a score, a man running from everything. He thought he had touched her by accident, a stupid, drunken mistake that had cost him his ship, but had given him the galaxy. He squeezed her hand. She leaned her head on his shoulder, a familiar, comforting weight. Her tail, the one that had started it all, snaked down and coiled gently around his ankle. He looked at his wife, his child, his new, impossible life. He thought, "I thought I touched her by accident, but she touched something in me, something I didn't know was broken, something I didn't know was home." They stood there, hand in hand, staring out at the new galaxy. Warriors, lovers, rulers, a family.